Hey everybody, and welcome back to the board meeting. Today we're doing a top 10 list. These are going to be my top 10 two-player only board games. These are strictly two players only. Maybe sometime in the future I'll make a list where I top 10 multiplayer games that are best at two players, but today we're concentrating on just those two-player only games. This was a pretty hard list to make because two players is actually the most common way I play most board games. So I love so many of these games. It was hard to break them down to 10, but I did my best. So let's start with my number 10, which is Yinsh. And Yinsh is this abstract two-player only, of course, game that combines 5 in a row with checkers. Each player starts with 5 rings on this grid type of board, and your rings will just go in sort of this straight line on these lines of that grid. Whenever you move your ring, it leaves behind a marker of your color on that spot, and then whenever these markers are jumped, they switch to the other color, and your goal is to get 5 in a row 3 times of your color. But also, whenever you get 5 in a row, you have to remove one of your rings, so it gets harder as the game gets on to get these 5 in a row. It has that chess-like feel to it, and I just really love this game way more than I thought that I ever would. Now, next game up on this list, number 9, Imhotep the Duel. Now, Imhotep the Duel is, of course, the two-player only version of Imhotep, because anytime you make a two-player version of these bigger games, they always call it the Duel for some reason. You will be placing out workers on the tiles or launching a boat, and how you decide to launch the boat will give those workers certain bonuses from the boats that will score you points in a different variety of ways. So you will have to decide whether you want to place one of your people down or maybe launch a boat to either get certain bonuses or to even stop your opponents from getting something you know they want. It does a really good job of having tension just like in the original game, and every choice is painstaking if you want to potentially help yourself or to thwart your opponent, and for that reason it is my number 9. Let's move on to my number 8, which is Targi. Targi is this worker placement game where players will take turns laying their worker on the outside of this grid, this 5x5 grid of cards. Then you place another worker where the row and column of your previously placed workers intersect. Then you will take the actions of all the cards that you have meeples on in whichever order you choose. Your scoring will be largely from tribal cards that you have paid for and collected throughout the game. This is one of my favorite worker placement games, largely due to this is quite a unique game, and I don't know of many, if any, other games that quite replicate these mechanics from Targi. So if you enjoy worker placement games with resource management, I would definitely check out Targi. Moving on to my number 7. My number 7 is Schotten Totten. Schotten Totten is this small card game that players are trying to claim 5 of the stones in between the two players, or just 3 that are adjacent to each other. Each player will be trying to play the best poker-like hand of 3 cards on their side of the stones. Once each player has laid 3 cards on their side of the stone, you decide who wins it, or if a player can outright prove that it is impossible for the opponent to beat their hand on that stone, even before they lay 3 cards, they can also claim that stone. This is quite an old game now and has been re-implemented and re-themed several times, but this is my favorite version of it, and it still holds up excellently compared to modern games. Now, my number 6, Summoner Wars 2nd Edition, and I haven't played the original, so it's just 2nd Edition when I'm talking about this. Now, this is a 2-player dueling card game that players get to choose a faction and take control of that deck. The deck is consisted of units to put out and fight, spells to help you give you tactical advantages, and gates to help you summon new units and provide you some defensive cover. The whole goal is to take out the other player's summoner, which is the leader of that faction. Each faction plays quite unique, with having very distinct different abilities and powers for them. That, plus the fact that you can actually deck build with these factions, gives this game a ton of replayability, and each game will give you a new puzzle to try and solve against the other player. Moving on to my number 4. Number 4 is Glasgow. Glasgow is this Euro resource management game that players will be cooperatively but competitively building structures in the city. This uses a rondel wheel track where players can move as far along the track to take that action, but you don't want to move too far because the next player to go is the player that's farthest back on the track. So if you move too far, your opponent will get several moves and actions before it is your turn again. I haven't played many Euro-style two-player games, and this definitely fits that category, yet is an extremely simple game that you can teach in 5 minutes or less, but will give you a depth of choices that is hard to come by in such a straightforward package, and that is something I can really appreciate. Moving on to my number 4. Number 4 is Watergate. Watergate is this historically themed game, which I love historical games, where one player represents the Nixon administration while the other player as the Washington Post. This is a tug-of-war style hand management game where players will be trying to pull pieces of evidence towards their side of the board. Nixon trying to cut off all the witnesses, where the Washington Post will try and connect the evidence to individual witnesses. What is really neat is how all of the people in this game are real and had a part in the actual trial making this game. Quite a thematic experience, combined with the cards you get to play, which will help swing things in your favor. I think the theme really pushes this game this high on this list for me, but there is also a really solid game underneath that theme as well. Now my number 3 pick. My number 3 pick is Onitama. This is a game I have played countless numbers of times, and whenever I describe this game, I always call it board gamers chess. And much like chess, when your pieces land on another player's pawns, you capture it and take it off the board. How you win is by capturing the other master or moving your master into the opponent's master's starting space. The 2 cards in front of you dictate how you can move any of your pawns. Choose one of those cards to use and place it to the side of the board, and then take the card that was previously on the side in front of you. So all the cards are constantly being swapped around, and you are able to see how your opponent can move, making this just a quite like chess game, but just with these ever-swapping move cards. I love this game, and don't imagine this will ever leave my collection. My number 2 is another simple little card game. My number 2 is Hanamakoji. This is an I cut, you choose game where players will be trying to have the most cards on their side of a geisha in order to win that geisha's favor. Players have a hand of cards that match up with these geishas. There are 4 different actions each player will do once each in a round, and 2 of the actions have to deal with you choosing sets of cards to give to your opponent, who then gets to choose some to put on their side of the geishas, and the rest go on your side of your geishas. Other actions will keep a card secret till the end of the round, and then placing it, and the last action just has you discard 2 cards. And you're just trying to have the most influence on certain geishas to win their favors. When you talk about simple games with extremely hard, juicy decisions to make, this game could be the mascot for that genre. You can teach this game in a minute, and you will be pulling out your hair which cards to choose in order to win the geisha's favors. And my number 1 2-player only game of all time is actually 2 games. I'm doing a little bit of a cheatsy doodle here. I'm choosing 2 games, and that's because they're so close that I didn't want to put both these games on the list, and both these games I love, but they're almost the same game. And I'm talking about Seven Wonders Duel and Unforgiven. Both of these are 2-player only games, of course, drafting games that players are drafting cards off these pyramids of cards that have some face up and some face down, and you can only draft cards that have no other cards laying on top of them, giving you some juicy options. Both have 3 different ways you can win the game that are, again, very similar. In Seven Wonders Duel, you can win with military victory by moving so far along the military track. In Unforgiven, you can win by moving so far along the reasonable doubt track. You can also win in Seven Wonders Duel if you get 6 different science tokens. And Unforgiven, you can win if you get 4 jurors on your side. Now, if the game doesn't end these ways, both games can end after 3 rounds, and you can just count up points on your cards that you've acquired throughout the game. The cards will have different resources printed on them that you can use to purchase more cards, or you can sell off a card instead of drafting it to give you resources to do other things with later. I have heard people say these aren't as similar as I think they are, but to me, this is as close to being just a retheme of a game without actually being a retheme. The theme of Seven Wonders Duel is just kind of this abstractish civilization building game, whereas Unforgiven is a historical theme about the Mary Surratt trial that was part of the Lincoln assassination trials. If I had to choose one, I would probably put Unforgiven as 1A and Seven Wonders Duel as 1B, just because I'm a sucker for, again, that good historically themed game. And that will wrap up this list and adjourn this meeting. What do you guys think of this list? Are there any games that you think should have been on this list, or any games that I put on this list that definitely shouldn't have made it? I do want to say there is one game that I think would have made it, but I've never gotten a chance to play it, and that is Lord of the Rings, War of the Rings. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan, so I just think I would really like that game. But maybe one day I'll get to play it. But anyways, if you did enjoy this video, make sure to like and subscribe to see more weekly content from me, Shane, at the board meeting in the future. And maybe hit that bell if you would like to get some notifications. I hope you all have an amazing day, and take care, everyone.